My name is Wes Keltner. I'm the CEO of Gun Interactive. I also am the studio head here and do direction for art and audio on the games that we produce.
So Wes, I first want to ask how this game came about. How did this inception, how did Texas Chain Saw become your next big project?
So the rights holder for Texas Chain Saw is Kim Henkel, who was the original writer of the first film. He's often known as sort of the co-director because he stood right next to Tobe Hooper in just about every single shot. And he's still the rights holder. He's a great guy, by the way. We get to work with him on a lot of the characters we made for the game and stuff. So it's pretty cool. But his son, who's about my age, he played Friday the 13th. And so did some of the other folks that work at Vortex/Exerbia. That's the sort of conglomerate that owns the rights to that first 74 film. And we just got connected through, friends of friends kind of thing. Because once you kind of get plugged into the world of horror, it's not that big of a community. I'm sure you guys can feel the same way, even when it comes to like enthusiast press and that type of journalism. As you find out, it's a small world, And we get introduced to those folks and start talking, and they're basically just like, we love the game. We love what you did with Friday 13th. Is there any chance you would want to do something with Texas as well? And we're like, heck yeah. And so we start talking about, what does that mean? What does that look like? And it became an exciting challenge for us because of that. What makes that film interesting? A lot of folks think of that first film as, oh, it's about Leatherface, and because that's honestly what the film industry pulled out of that first film and tried to basically make their own Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, or et cetera, right? Like they wanted that bankable, known mask, et cetera, right? But what made that first film so interesting is it's a whole family of crazy people, right? Like they're all cannibals, and there's this hierarchy that's there within, and it's a twisted group of individuals. And when we were like really studying that film and realizing that like that's really the DNA of this, the game should mirror that. And we knew we didn't want to just go make another Friday the 13th. We already did that. We already had one killer versus whatever, right? So we never are wanting to make the same game twice. We start over on every single title. We don't reuse stuff. It's like fresh from the start every time, because we're always connected to the DNA of the IP right from the start. So we started looking at what we could do with this, and that's where we came upon this like a 3v something has never been done. Like we haven't seen it like that. We've seen, now of course you look at Left 4 Dead and their multiplayer, you can have multiple, from the smoker and the this and that and the other thing, right? Where you could have like a 3v something, but it's not the exact same thing as what we're looking at with what modern asymmetric horror looks like. So it became a unique challenge for us, a design challenge that we welcome. Like we wanted to push asymmetric horror forward instead of just making a lateral move or doing something that is expected. It's never something that we at Gun like get out of bed every day to do, is let's just do what everybody else does. Like we wanted to push it forward. So that's how we met and got connected in with the IP, and what then drove to the design of where Texas ended up with.
It's so rare that the person who created a massive franchise is still the owner of the rights to that franchise in modern day. But I think you can see that that DNA in all like the marketing for the game, the trailers. It's so true to that 74 Texas Chain Saw movie. I'm curious, what was it like, just the process of recreating so much from that movie? Even like the house in the trailers looks like one-to-one, down to the small details. But I'm also curious if you guys take any liberties with stuff from that source material.
Yeah, so we spent a few months physically in Texas, touring every single filming location, as well as going to rural parts of sort of central Texas, which is where a lot of the filming took place, just south of Austin. If you kind of look at that area of the map, We went all through that thing, rented a couple cars and just drove around. I think the last time I saw was somewhere around 12,000 photos that were taken while we were there. And all those get turned into game art. You sit down with your artists, your technical artists, and you go through these photos and picking out the flora and the fauna of the area. We did dumb stuff like we studied the migratory patterns of the birds in the area during like April timeframe, which is about when our game takes place. So that the birds you hear chirping are the birds you're supposed to hear. It's little obsessive things like that we enjoy doing. It was painstaking but fun. It's like a labor of love to do that, to be able to tour the house, which they've since moved, but some of the same textures remain. The floor is the same. Some elements of the walls are the same. The stairs are the same. The newel post when you come down the steps, like those kind of things were all the same. And so we could get in really tight with high-end cameras and take pictures of those textures so that when you walk into the house and you open the front door, if you look down at the floorboards, those are the exact floorboards that was in the film. So for us, it's difficult to create a horror multiplayer game and expect people to remain in some moment of sort of being scared or having moments of terror. It's difficult to do that when it's your 100th hour playing, your 1,000th hour playing, right? It becomes difficult to do that. And one of our jobs as designers is to at least assure that you're never pulled out of the immersion because something doesn't look right. You know, like if you know that film, then when you walk to the front of that house, the shutters better be correct, the windows are correct, like everything is the way it's supposed to be, so that you're being pulled into the world of Texas. You stay more immersed in those moments. So when you're in that, then it's a little easier for you to have those, moments because you feel more immersed in the world. If this were all generic and it was a generic building, but you still saw like Leatherface running around or something, I mean, that's kind of cool, but it's not the same thing. All of us at Gun and Sumo were militant on that part. It has to be as one-to-one as we can possibly make it. Now, some of the liberties we had to take place is sometimes the camera, when you watch the film, the camera doesn't go through every single room of the house. The camera doesn't go full 360 around the gas station. Like, that's not a thing. And so we have to fill in the blanks, with our own creativity. But additionally, on top of that is we have a camera to deal with that's, attached to, behind the thing. And so whenever you're walking into areas, like you have to give a little more headroom. So doors are a little bigger, it's this tricks of the trade. You can have to do hallways are a little wider. So, it's not exactly like the scale to a human like it would be in the film, but it's pretty dang close. But yeah, so it's, again, the term that we keep getting sort of jokingly, people say to us, man, you guys sound obsessed. It's like, yeah. We kind of are for the details, but there's a reason behind it. It's not just because, sure, we are horror nerds. Everyone that works here is very much certified as that, but it's also that immersion quality that we think, being stewards of the IP, it's our responsibility to A, do it right, and B, to keep you immersed in the world.
I do want to, I've watched so much of this game on Twitch because I find the design is just so impressive. This includes like just your gameplay mechanics as well as your map design. You have this kind of game loop where certain characters are more mobile than others. Certain people clear things better than others. So like you really do have to work as a team. But can you talk about how that kind of evolved, the process of like, well, the victims can crawl through corridors and like, the Leatherface can't chase them there. This person can leap over this table. This person can go other things. Like, talk about how that evolved.
One of the top things that you're always concerned about when you're making multiplayer titles is speed, the speed of which characters are. If it's a PvP type situation, speed is always the thing you're thinking about. Stamina is always the thing you're thinking about. And so one of the analogies that we've always sort of talked about here internally, and this even dates back to Friday the 13th, is if you stick a rubber band on this finger and you stretch it to this finger, right? This is your tension, but it's also how close can the bad guy get to me? And then how far can I get away? And you can only stretch a rubber band so far, and then you're usually going to get back again, right? And so if you can create mechanics and level design that allows those moments to happen, what we're doing is tension, release, tension, release. And those are paramount to a horror film and a horror game. And that can also be very prevalent in single player horror games as well. If you play Outlast, they are masters at that. Resident Evil, masters at that feeling of tension and then release, tension and then release. I think it's crucial to that feeling. So it goes into the design, it goes into the mechanics, it goes into the stamina of them, it goes into what are their abilities, what are their perks. All those things are being considered whenever you're thinking about that idea of what when you want these two forces to come together, what is the intended result? As a gameplay designer, what do you want to happen, right? Do you want them to just run away? Do you want them to hide? Do you want them to stealth? Do you want them to fight? What's your goal? And that, when you answer that initial question, then now like concentric, like rings on a target, you start creating the loops that fit into the type of gameplay that you want to happen. And what we knew we didn't want was, this isn't like a melee fight, beat 'em up. Like, you shouldn't be able to just roll in there and start punching Leatherface, and that's not, we don't want that. That doesn't match the IP. It doesn't match the tone of the films. It just didn't make sense for that. And so it's like, okay, we'll take that away. So then what else do we have? Do we want this to just be like a game about running? It's like, well, chase is fun, but chase can get old. If it's just a foot race, like that can get old. So where are we then? Okay, we need to start experimenting with some stealth elements, start looking at some more hide and seek sort of mechanics, but still allow the player to give them the agency to run if they want, but it's in short bursts. You got to use it wisely. So you get into that risk reward mentality too when you're thinking about those. So the things like the crawling under and getting away is, you come into a room and you start searching, you're looking for something to better the odds and get yourself out of the situation, and then here comes somebody. Well, you need to have some agency there. You need to be able to decide, do I want to try to run through this door? Is that door locked? Oh, that door's open, but is there someone over there? You got a pretty good shot if you use, if you slide under, or you sneak through some of the side cracks and things. It all creates also cool cinematic moments. We really do a good camera, in my opinion, do a good camera treatment when you're moving through those elements. And we looked at a lot of single player, honestly, to like bring the camera movements and bring some of the mechanics that you see that work really well in single player. How do you make those work in multiplayer? And we studied those intensely until we could get them and fine tune them to a point that we thought, this feels pretty good to us. We're pretty discerning horror folks over here and gamers as well. And if we're starting to see like there's something here and we think this is pretty dang fun, it helps with the confidence of the whole team, knowing like, I think we got something here. And then again, being able to show it at the technical test and seeing how well it was received and the warm messages we got from fans around the world. It was a big day for us and for Sumo as well. As you kind of got to go, like step back and go, we knew we had something, but you just don't know until you like give it to the wilds and say, what do you guys think? Because it's your baby, it's your thing. It's what you've been doing for 3 years of your life. And you might be really still confident, but you still got that little bit of doubt, that little voice in your head that's like, I don't know, maybe more, maybe we need more. Should we, you know what I mean? So it felt good to release that out and let people come back with their feedback and their comments and suggestions and etc.
One of the coolest things about this game, and one of the first things for me that when I saw this, I was like, oh wow, okay, this is something I need to be excited about, was when you guys announced that Kane Hodder was going to be actually doing the motion capture and playing Leatherface. Obviously, he's played Leatherface in film, he's played Jason, right. Horror movie Legionnaire. What was it like collaborating with him and having him kind of bring that physical authenticity to the character?
Well, obviously we worked with Kane on Friday the 13th. We wanted him to do all the motion capture. He was our real Jason. That was the only Jason that we gravitated towards when we went back and looked at the films. We thought his screen presence was superior, and he took that character to a different place. That while some other Jasons are awesome to watch on screen, like there's a difference when you watch Kane do a physical performance, because when you're wearing a mask, you how do you emote? How do you like give that screen presence? You have to do it with your body, and Kane, that's his tool that he uses quite well. So when we worked with him when you're in the mocap studio and you're around somebody, I think we did like 3 weeks of mocap with him on Friday. You spend that kind of time with someone intimately, you get to know them. It becomes less of a business thing and more of a just friends hanging out. We toured around with him and went to horror conventions after the launch on Friday, and just got to be more than just like business colleagues. And I can honestly and respectfully say he's a friend of mine, and he's a friend of most of the people that work here. We check in on each other, send texts to each other, birthdays, all that kind of stuff. So it was a no-brainer to go back to him and say, hey, we're making Texas, do you want to be involved with it? But it went a little deeper than that, because One of his close friends was Gunnar Hansen, who obviously played Leatherface in the 74 film, who has since passed away. And I couldn't think of anyone else that I thought could do it justice and pay a tribute to Gunnar's performance better than Kane could. Now, obviously, he's played Leatherface in one of the films, but Gunnar has his own look, his own swagger, his own, like, all of that was like very much Gunnar brought that performance to life. While Kane is not the same thing as Gunnar, Kane has his own screen, sort of presence. Going to him, and I remember we sat down and had dinner together, and he didn't know what I was about to drop on him, and we were just sitting there talking, and I was like, so we got rights to Texas Chain Saw Massacre, and he like lit up. I was like, the original one? I'm like, uh-huh. And he was like, oh, wow. And he was like kind of going through his head of like, what's the gameplay going to be like? And what's this, that, and the other thing? And I go, well, I want you to play Leatherface. And, not to like take away from the mystery of Kane, but he got a little choked up during that conversation because he knew the weight of that. He knew what that meant to follow literally in the footsteps of Gunnar. That was a huge responsibility for him. And he went back and studied. And he first of all read Chainsaw Confidential like 6 times. I don't know if anyone's ever read that book. It's mandatory reading here at Gun. It's a good book. But he rereads that, which is Gunnar's autobiography of what it took to make that 74 film. But then also went back and rewatched the movie over and over and over in slow motion, looking at like how his feet move, how his hips move, all those pieces. And then we get in the mocap studio, and we spent the first 3 hours just going through that. Just start walking. Pick something up. How would you touch a doorknob? Because when we did Friday 13th, this is second nature to him. How would Jason do this? He already knows. Like, he just does it. And he, during Friday 13th became almost part of like being the director of the motion capture himself, because he knows that character so well. And we may be looking at a shot list and we say, Jason gets knocked down and gets up. How would that happen? What would that look like? And he goes, it would look like this. And he would do it because he's been Jason, for 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Like, he knows that character. This is new, right? And so it's what would Gunnar have done in that? And it's going back and re-looking at footage and trying to figure those pieces out and trying to connect some dots that weren't fully there, that we didn't see some of the elements that you see in our game. You didn't see Leatherface go through that in the 74 film. You didn't really see someone seriously fight back against him. Like, what would that look like? How would he react to it? And there was a lot of discussions like that, where it's just like you and me sitting here. We're sitting in the motion capture studio. Of course, he's got the mocap studio, the suit on with all the little balls on it, looking completely ridiculous. And you're trying to have like a real conversation where you're like, he gets hit by somebody. What does he do? Or it's time for him to open a door. It's time for him to pick up the chainsaw. It's time for him to like do these little things that you don't really think about. But we sat for hours discussing just those smallest little things to make sure that we're paying tribute to Gunnar the right way. And that was very, very important to not only Kane, but to all of us at Gun and Sumo as well. It's a responsibility, and he understood the weight of that. And so that's why we work with Kane, though, is because he knows what it takes to bring an iconic screen performance. He knows what it means to put on a mask and become something bigger than himself. He knows what that means. We could have hired just some mocap actor and stuck a Leatherface mask on him and said, go be Leatherface. And we probably could have got something okay, but we don't do just okay. Again, we're obsessive, and we push as hard as we can to deliver experience that's truly unforgettable. And the way to do that is to work with people that are unforgettable.
Now, working with other people's IP is always challenging, I guess is the word I'll say. And I know this is a sensitive topic, but I think it's important. What did you learn from Friday the 13th, like working with the licensors on that one, that you've applied and made better in Texas Chain Saw? Like, what can Gun do to make sure that something that happened with Friday the 13th doesn't happen with Chain Saw, I guess is the question.
Well, what happened with Friday it's never happened to anything. So it's not just what happened to a game. It's entertainment industry as a whole that had never occurred, and it impacted the entire license. Setting a legal precedent, like there is nothing you could have done about that. It shook the entire industry, and it forced TV, film, even music, like all forms of entertainment, to go back and relook at how they do contracts from that one case. It becomes a complicated question to answer because it was a first. But, we made, adjustments, but the entire industry made adjustments on like what kind of contract what's the legalese in the contract, like the Copyright Act is what kicked a lot of this stuff off. And studying that and making sure you have all your ducks in a row, you do as much of that as you possibly can. The other thing that's the benefit that we have that we didn't have with Friday the 13th is the owner of the Texas Chain Saw Massacre of the 1974 is Kim Henkel, and Kim Henkel alone. And he was the writer of the original film. There's no one else that can step up and claim copyright on it. It's just Kim. So that obviously makes things a little more simple whenever you're crossing your T's and dotting your I's, is that it's him. And the other good news is he's an awesome guy. We sat and had beers with him and just shoot the shit, and he's genuinely one of the more funny people you'll meet. He doesn't take himself seriously. He likes to have a good time. It's been a blessing to be able to sit with him and pick his brain on the things they did in the film, and then what should we do in the game. And he's sharp as a tack too. Like, it's been cool to work with. So the entire industry has changed because of that case, and we're in a much stronger position given the situation that we have with Texas Chain Saw and Kim Henkel when it comes to the legal side of that.
So I know that the original 74 movie is the focus, but I am curious, has there been any thoughts, seeing if you could in the future, maybe DLC, like branch out and include characters from one of the sequels, one of the reboots? I know it gets really dicey there with the fans about what people like and what they don't, but is that something you guys have put some thought towards?
I mean, of course we've talked about it. I mean, what studio wouldn't want to at least kick the tires on, like, what about all this other stuff? And yeah, there's fan favorites, and there's ones that fans don't care about. But then there's also the facet of, well, who owns all that? And it's not Kim Henkel. It's like there's an entire film industry with studios there within that this entity has distribution rights, but this entity has film rights, and this entity, they split that one to give film to this one and TV and streaming to that one. And it's kind of all over the place. And that's where you can set yourself up for a potential problem down the road from a legal standpoint that is not as clear cut as what we have currently with the 74 film. So it's a discussion. It's a thing that we talk about here, but we can't make any promises on any of that just because of how that is like a minefield to walk through. And I have to do that very carefully. So it's why we're not out beating the drum and telling everybody, like, we're going to go do this stuff, is because you don't know what skeletons are in the closets. You know what I mean? Just the legal side of it, before you even get into talking to potential producers that want to have their own input on the game, you have to get over the first hurdle, which is like, who owns these rights? And can I even secure them? And if I secure them, am I securing them exclusively? Or does the studio have the right to also go hire a different studio and make a game as well, or put a character like somewhere else? Like, what am I paying for? Whenever I have to buy a license and potentially kick a royalty and do all these kind of things. Like, I wish it were like walking into a Target to go buy some towels. I wish it was that easy, where I can just go, I need this and I have the money for it. Thank you. It's mine now. See you. I wish it were that easy, but it is so the opposite of that.
Your technical test ran for 4 days in May. That must have been a great time for your team. Was there anything players did that you weren't expecting when you saw all, these thousands of players, tens of thousands of players play it?
Yeah, that's the case for, you can ask any game dev that's made like a multiplayer game, and maybe even single player, where the first time they watch like on Twitch or someone in sort of the world is playing their game, you're scratching your head like, they're doing what? Like, it's things that you don't think they're going to do. I think the biggest takeaway was that, we were reminding players, like, as soon as the match starts, like, what they're supposed to be doing. So if you're playing as a family, it's like, hey, you might want to secure the property. You might want to, and we show images of like Hitchhiker working on the generator to turn on the electric, and you see Cook put locks on doors. So we were telling you, like, this is what you're supposed to do. And everybody wholesale ignored it. And all they did was just like bum rush the basement. Like, I just want to get to victims and kill them. And we were like, but that's not what even the characters are designed to do. Like, not really. Like, you don't necessarily use the cook as like the brute that's going to be running around chasing people and killing them. He's not very fast. He doesn't inflict as much damage as some of the others do. Like, that's not the point of how you're supposed to use that character. And so there's some of that too that we saw that was like, hey guys, this isn't just like a free-for-all, just take off running and start beating the crap out of people. The whole game was designed around sort of playing roles, so to speak, and do some of these things in the early game to secure your late game during a match. So that was one that was a pretty big eye opener for us, as we were like, oh, they're not getting this. They don't get that there's a bit of strategy that needs to occur before the two forces come together. You got a little bit of planning you need to work on. So that was a pretty big takeaway for us, that we realized we needed some better onboarding, and heck, I mean, we even took the social, and we were like putting out GIFs and videos and pictures of like, this is what you're supposed to do, like do it this way and you'll notice a difference. Because we had a lot of people coming back to us and being like, everyone's just escaping, everyone just gets out of the basement and they rush the exit and the game's over. And it's like, well, that'll happen every time if you're not like securing the property. And you're like, what do you mean? We're like, look at the first millisecond that the game starts, we hit you on the screen to say, secure the property, do these things. So people were just not looking at that, which I guess shouldn't be that big of a surprise, right? Like, people don't do tutorials, people don't read instructions, they don't read anything on the internet.
Read?
Like, yeah, I know, I get it.
I just want to stab things. Read.
I know, right? And I can kind of relate to that. Like, I don't mind. I like to get in and stab. But so that one was one that we were like, yeah, we need to figure this out, make this a little, make that onboarding, a little better. And the other thing that was unexpected was the thirst for some of the family members was kind of weird.
Oh boy, yeah. That's a whole rabbit hole of its own.
Yeah, we'll save that for Shacknews After Dark. Y'all want to get into that conversation?
I know you said that you guys never really want to make the same game twice, but I think that no matter what, a lot of Friday the 13th fans are going to come to this as like, this is the spiritual successor. This is like the next evolution that we never got or whatever. What can those players expect, I guess, out of this game? Like, what are you excited for them to see that's different? Anything that's maybe the same that'll give them those shades of the original or the previous game?
I mean, first and foremost, it's a gun game, so it's going to be authentic. We take a white glove approach to when we work with IP, so you can expect the best treatment to the IP. So if you're a fan of the first Texas Chainsaw film, then trust that it's in good hands and that you're going to feel like you're walking around in that space. So that would be like probably the first thing. The second thing is, if you were a fan of Friday the 13th, like, that's awesome. We're thank you, first of all, for checking out the game and enjoying it. I think you're going to like this next evolutionary step of where there shouldn't be this sameness, and I feel a lot of sameness right now. I would argue that Gun and Behavior were the two studios that rekindled and reminded and pushed asymmetric horror forward again. You see some asymmetry in the past from even like Alien vs. Predators, and then Left 4 Dead, and then Evolve, and you had some things that were like these little pops of like, wow, and then you didn't see it again, right? And I would argue that it was Friday 13th and Dead by Daylight that basically brought that from the ash, right? Like, this, here's what asymmetric horror should be. And I thought that was, it's awesome to like be a steward of that and be in that company and know that we're, sort of at this point grandfathers to this new modern, what asymmetric horror has become. But what I kept seeing coming after that was just a lot of the same. And that's disheartening as someone who makes video games. Not that I'm disheartened that they're copying. No, I'm disheartened that, hey, we all should be pushing this thing towards something, not towards each other. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not the point. That's not what we should be doing. Like, go check out, if you love Dead by Daylight, go play the game and be inspired by that, and then push it in a different direction. If you love the gameplay of Friday 13th, be inspired by that, and then take it somewhere that people didn't expect. But what I saw a lot of was just the same formula with a different coat of paint on it. And that's like, come on, we're better than that as an industry. Like, get inspired, get creative and push forward. So if you enjoyed playing Friday the 13th and those moments of where you had some like cinematic horror that would occur, right? Where it felt like you were in a slasher sandbox, is what we always sort of referred Friday to, having that sort of feeling of you're going to feel right at home in Texas, because it is still part of who we are, and the type of games we enjoy is giving players agency to. It's one of the things we talk about here is when you're with your homies and you're sitting in the basement, you're watching a horror movie, whatever it is, Nightmare on Elm Street, I don't care what it is, and the credits roll, you look at each other and you say, what would you have done? Gun makes games that answers that question, because you get to go do it and put your money where your mouth is and see what would you have done. And so that'll always be sprinkled in to the types of games that we make. That's just the thing that resonates with us. And I think we've started to build a community that says, they raise their hand and go, yeah, that's like me. I like that. So that's always going to be the focus. So if you liked Friday, I think you're going to feel at home at Texas, but you're going to enjoy that. We are learning. We are trying to get better at our craft. We are trying to push the asymmetric genre forward and do something different and bold and innovative. And if that's the type of thing you want to see, something new, you're going to enjoy it. If you just wanted the same game but with a different coat of paint on it, there's some of those already that exist out there. You can go find them and play them today, like if you're into that. If you're looking for something different, but still feels like kind of nostalgic, and I think you'll be right at home.